Well, hello there and welcome back to Cyboss TV. I'm Daisy McAndrew, delighted to be your host for this week at the Boston Convention Center. Now, we're moving on to discussing so-called black swans. What are they? How can you prepare for them? Can you prepare for them? It's the art of knowing the unknown. Sounds almost impossible, doesn't it? Well, to help me discuss this issue, I'm delighted to be joined by two experts. Welcome, gentlemen, to the show. We have Mark Hale from Chaps. Good afternoon to you. Is it afternoon yet? No, not quite. Nowhere near. Nowhere near. And Browne from Swift. Good morning to both of you.
Good morning. Thanks.
Black swans, are there different identifications, different definitions of a black swan? What do you mean to be a black swan?
It's a great question. Commonly accepted, it's something which is unexpected with a major impact, which is retrospectively rationalized. It can be explained in mathematical terms, theoretical terms. It can be determined into technology terms, but from an operations perspective, one person's black swan is another person's white swan. So for me, a black swan comes down to a management failure, drawing the risk appetite in the wrong place, and not doing enough to imagine and prepare for a certain class of risks, which I think we're all accustomed to seeing. I hear a lot of people talk about black swans as being unprecedented, but actually, so BP deep water, for example, I think of Exxon, people talking about Lehman Brothers, I think about Barings. So for me, it's really not imagining the future and assuming that something's unprecedented.
The definition of black swan seems to have stretched a lot in the last few years. I mean, I think when the original book was written, it was practically any sort of historical or major event, but now it seems to be almost anything bad that happens to a company. Do you think the definition has got a bit muddied along the way?
I think so. I think that as we experience more events that we never could foresee, then I think that you start to apply the same theory and thinking to each of those. So for each event, some of them might be geopolitical, they might be environmental, they might come from any source. It's really the impact that we have to worry about, and how do we prepare for that impact? So
yes, I suppose that's the point, isn't it? It's preparing for sort of crisis management in some ways, I suppose, and management, you would say, being the important word there rather than crisis.
Yes, I would. In yesterday's session, I reminded the military people in the room of a fairly accepted term, which is no plan survives first contact with the enemy. The mistake with black swans is to look for them and try and identify each individual one. I think you're absolutely right to talk about classes of risk and then making sure that you are able to deal with any particular instance using common tools and methods. So for me, I don't have nightmares about black swans because I'm pretty confident in a robust set of processes to deal with any variation by doing the things you have to do. So reducing things into certain terms, making assumptions, running governance, making sure you're clear about what's good data, what's bad data, what's known, what's unknown.
And was this the type of thing that was discussed at your session yesterday?
Yes, it absolutely was. As a matter of fact, yesterday we brought together experts, Mark is one of those, from IT operations and risk practices, which gave us the banter and the dialogue that we were looking for in the topic. Those perspectives lead to a lot of conclusions, which were also provided to the audience so that there was some takeaway for the audience to enjoy and to think about when they go back to their daily job.
What were those top tips, if you could name just a few?
Top tips. Governance is vital. Making sure that the right experience and seniority is in the boardroom so that somebody does ask the difficult questions that everyone is too afraid to ask. That's a common failure with not dealing with black swan risks. Very evident in the Northern Rock example. I have the interview of the chairman of the risk committee imprinted on my brain, where he explained a well thought out process, but it simply didn't operate to the right time frame and with the right degree of imagination that it should.
I'm going to pause you right there because Michael McGovern is joining us now. Michael, I'm sorry we started without you.
No worries.
Quite a tight schedule, but we're delighted you've been able to join us. Of course,
Thank
Michael,
you.
We've been discussing, Michael, you're from Browne Brothers Harriman. We've just been discussing the session that you were all involved with yesterday. It sounds like there was some really good practical tips that people could use to try to mentally and practically prepare for black swans. What would you say were the best tips you heard yesterday?
Right. Well, I'd say that probably the most effective tip or strategy that I could recommend would be to, for any firm that's considering the impact or the potential for a black swan event to impact their business, to bring colleagues together across disciplines, sit them down and I believe the term of our art is a tabletop exercise or desktop exercise in which one, conducts sort of a mental review and debate of what a given cause, what the effects of a given cause would be with respect to a potential black swan event. So, the one that I can mention in recent memory is when we were having the potential unpleasantness with the euro. Mm-hmm. And the Gang of 17, and thinking through the impact in each country and how we would react should there be a need to delay or stop trading or deal with any action or inaction by a central bank. So that sort of activity ends up expanding the thinking of our colleagues in operations and risk and systems, and in doing so really gets people more comfortable with the notion that these are events that are going to occur. While they may be low probability, they can be quite high impact. And in fact, their unpredictability is coupled with their inevitability with the passage of time. So,
I wonder whether with all this discussion about preparation for black swans, whether it's possible in some instances to over-prepare, in that perhaps you prepare in the wrong way and people get down a silo, down a one train or track of thinking, and actually when the reality happens, it's very different to the preparations and you can mess it up because you've over-prepared. Is that?
Couldn't agree more. The danger is being distracted by the vogue of the day. Cyber is a vogue of the day.
Yeah.
I thought it was quite reassuring in yesterday's session to see that people were contemplating a range of different scenarios. As Mike says, the rehearsal, the desktop exercise is an important means to make sure you are flexible and agile. And I would take that one step further and I would say practice, learn, do it again, and making sure you've got people in who really stretch the imagination.
Absolutely. Dale, what would you say were best practices?
I think the best practices are, first of all, understanding your risks and what risks exist to your business in the class by classifying them. Then what's your appetite for those risks? And once you understand that, then you can prepare whether it's tools, assets, or systems and services, and how do they respond in a resilient manner to failures. What we can't forget, though, are the people and the processes. If you take the example of today in Hong Kong, where demonstrations turn into a potential of loss of communications, if you have operations there, how do you bring those somewhere else from an operational standpoint, but more importantly, worry about the safety of the people that you have employed there, and then if they are safe, how can they also contribute since they are critical minds in your operational environment?
Michael, would you agree with?
Yeah, I would certainly agree. I think one of the most straightforward ways to respond to these risks is to incorporate this kind of thinking into the business continuity planning that every institution, I think, is doing today. So, again, it's more about a expansion of thinking and a recognition that there are these sort of different classes of scenarios that can occur, and they require different responses. And in so doing, look at as an IT person, I go to the technological solutions that are available to support some of what has been raised in terms of operational redundancy across region, across the globe, and some of the more adaptive technologies that are available today that make that a much more feasible outcome.
Now, would it be very unkind if I was to ask all of you to say what you think the next black swan will be? Or does that completely go against all the rules of black swanitude?
I think it probably does, but let me issue this call to arms. So to deliver the tips and the practices that we've been talking about, the question for everyone is who is thinking the unthinkable in your organization, who has the capacity amongst your senior leadership to do that, because in a busy schedule. We know of the demands of regulation. We know the demands of meeting the needs of shareholders and users, that senior management time is focused on that. But somebody has to be thinking the unthinkable.
But do you think there's ever a tendency to do a sort of, the boy who cried wolf with the people who are thinking the unthinkable? As in, perhaps there are certain individuals in organisations who are doing it, but other members assume they're exaggerating, or it's their own little bugbear about something, and perhaps certain times those people don't get listened to enough.
One thing I would say in that regard is, whilst we said that cyber is not necessarily the next black swan, I think it is of sufficient mind share among boards, management committees, that it's a good sort of lead-in to have a discussion and to get people to sort of get past the skepticism.
Yeah.
And go from the headlines to some proper planning and allocation of the right sort of cross-discipline minds to looking at it.
And that seems to have been a real buzzword, the cross-discipline, the fact that actually now, all different areas, all different sectors are involved in the planning.
Absolutely vital. The title is Black Swan, but it's a relative term. So in answer to the question of people crying wolf and having the ability to do that, it comes down to leadership, because one person's black swan is another prepared person's white.
Yeah, so in fact could be some opportunities. If you spot them, you're ready, other people aren't
Absolutely
ready.
Right.
Sounds a bit cutthroat, doesn't it? But I
That's
guess
business.
That's business. And from Swift's point of view, I guess this is a very important area for you to have a sort of overseeing role in.
Absolutely. Resilience is our brand.
Yeah.
So resilience and security. So we have to think about it, and we do think about it very hard and involve all the disciplines of our organization. We asked that very question as a poll question yesterday in this session, and we had 10 answers, and 8 of the 10 answers were selected by the audience, which meant that there was a broad swath. Nobody can really predict what's next, but thinking in terms of classes, as Mike has said and Mark has said, helps us at least simplify the solutions that we have to apply.
Absolutely. Well, gentlemen, I hope we haven't given anybody nightmares this afternoon, but rather, as we said, given them practical advice and tips that they can use and take back. And Michael, we're so grateful that you rushed from, I know you had a very important meeting that you were rushing over here, so apologies that we started without you, but we were very grateful. So thank you to Mark Hale, thank you to Browne, and thank you to Michael McGovern. Many thanks. That's it from Sibos TV for the moment, but we'll be back in just a few minutes.